Guys, I'm really happy to welcome to the podcast Andrew Bailey, the Attorney General of the state of Missouri. He's the 44th Attorney General of Missouri. He's also a combat veteran, constitutional conservative, and the state's chief legal and law enforcement official. Andrew, welcome to the podcast. You are embroiled in a very important censorship case against the Biden administration. Can you talk a little bit about the basic content of the case? Because I think it has huge implications for whether or not this censorship regime is going to continue or whether you will find a way to bring it to a halt.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. And this is about protecting the Constitution and the constitutional rights of Missouri citizens for me. This is the most important First Amendment case in a generation. And we've used it to uncover a vast censorship enterprise that emanates from the White House across a spectrum of federal bureaucratic agencies where they've coerced and colluded with their cronies and woke big tech social media companies to silence Americans' voices in violation of the First Amendment right to free speech, specifically targeting conservative voices. This is scary stuff. And we've gone to court. We filed suit. We have also obtained tens of thousands of pages in discovery and taken numerous depositions. And we're going to keep pushing forward. We've asked the court for a preliminary injunction that would stop Biden's use of this vast censorship enterprise to silence American voices.
All right. You said a lot there, and I want to put it in slow motion a little bit. So you mentioned, first of all, that we're dealing with not just the White House, but a bunch of different agencies across the swath of the federal government. So let's talk about some of those. What agencies are we talking about?
Well, the court has identified that the nerve center of the vast censorship enterprise emanates from the Department of Homeland Security. So think about that for a second. I mean, you've got an entity that was created in the wake of 9/11 to protect Americans from foreign attack, now being used to weaponized against Americans and against our right to free speech. I mean, this is scary stuff, but we've got email exchanges between DHS, between the FBI, Department of Justice, senior communications officials at the White House that specifically say the chain of command goes all the way up to the very top levels of the White House. But the nerve center is housed there in DHS.
All right. And you're talking about the collusion of these agencies. They're working hand in hand with the digital platforms. Now, with the Twitter files, there was a lot of information, and I guess, great to have because you got the sense of what the internal workings were at Twitter. We've had obviously nothing like that from Facebook or Meta, nothing like that from Google, which owns YouTube. Have you been able to get Twitter files type of disclosures from these other digital platforms where I suspect the censorship may even have been, my own experience is the censorship was worse on YouTube and Facebook than on Twitter. What are your findings to date, and are you getting cooperation from these platforms?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the censorship is worse on some of the other platforms. And thank goodness Elon Musk has revealed so much, disclosed so much publicly in the Twitter files. And it largely corroborates the evidence we're seeing across the entire spectrum of big tech social media platforms. And we've even got instances where the big tech social media was pushing back against the White House. The White House would say, hey, take down this quote unquote COVID disinformation. And big tech social media would say, well, now hold on a minute. That doesn't actually violate our terms and conditions. And the White House says, we don't care, take it down anyway. So it is absolutely coercion and collusion. While campaigning, Joe Biden threatened to remove or revoke big tech social media's immunity from civil suit. And then certainly Jen Psaki from the White House podium has threatened, with antitrust actions against big tech social media. So that's where the coercion comes into place. And then the collusion that we've seen, at least, are the email exchanges between the bureaucrats in the federal government and big tech social media that specifically targets Americans' free speech. And we've got examples where there were emails that specifically target individuals like Tommy Lauren or even Tucker Carlson, where the White House would say, take down that video, take down that post. We don't like it. And again, scary stuff. The remedy for disfavored speech in this country has always been counter speech, not government censorship.
Now, when you talk about these platforms colluding with big tech, the government agencies, You suggested that there's an element of intimidation. The government is saying, if you don't do this, we can do this to you in return. We can take away your Section 230, or we can go after you with federal agencies. But isn't it also true that there's an ideological compatibility between the personnel at, say, Facebook? They like the Biden administration. They want to, by and large, do what it says. And so this is really ultimately an enterprise among allies and friends, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we see ideological overlap there. And again, there are instances where the White House and the federal bureaucrats were pushing big tech social media beyond its own censorship policies. I mean, think about this. No one would accept it in this country if you picked up your cell phone and tried to make a call. And when you started talking about something the cell phone company didn't like, they would mute you. No one would accept that. And yet we allow it to happen at big tech social media. But what we're talking about here is actually worse because it's done at the behest of the government, which clearly violates the founding principles behind the First Amendment, our original understanding of why we have the freedom of speech and freedom from government censorship. So this is a fight worth making. I'm proud to be a part of this effort, and I'm confident in our ultimate success there at the district court level.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, more with Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey.